Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Soul Focus Radio. This is part 2 of The Power of Forgiveness. I'm your host, Martin Friedman, and I'm joined by Dustin Washington.
Hey, what's up, Marty?
Hey, man. Not much, because we've only stopped talking like 5 minutes ago. So not a lot has changed in my life, and I would imagine the same for you.
You know, I had a couple sips of coffee, so I feel more energized.
I was going to say that can be life-changing sometimes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, thank you all for coming back and listening to part 2 of our conversation. I think we had a very rich, vulnerable, personal conversation about the power of forgiveness in our lives, and wondering if we can take this conversation and transition it more overtly to the world of social justice. We talked about it a little bit, right? We talked about how we took that rage and anger from our own lives, and we thought that was the righteous way. Just, we put it behind the fight. Like, we were always fighting, and we put it behind the fight. The problem, as you said before, is we were always fighting with each other. And as we both said, we were fighting with each other because we were fighting with ourselves, right? And so we were never really wielding power that would actually come to change. So just, how do you see the power of forgiveness being applied to the social justice movement? I'm doing air quotes, the anti-racist movements and air quotes, any of these movements that you and I have been a part of for, close to 30 years. How do you see forgiveness playing out in those movements?
Well, I'll start with the Martin Luther King quote that I butchered on our first session around the power of forgiveness. And Dr. King would talk about the fact that we are an inescapable web of mutuality. Big words. But essentially what he was saying is that we are one. We are one human family, but even bigger than that, we are one within the creator, within the universe, within the all, within the source. We are one. We're just individual expressions of the one. Right? And so as we engage with our fellow human beings, those who we might be in opposition to politically and socially, we tend to forget that we are one. And those of us who feel that we are coming at the world and our politics from the righteous place tend to create enemies. And we create enemies of other people. And the truth is, if we are one within the source, within the creator, within the universe, the creator has no enemies. Who could be the enemy of God? Who could be the enemy of the individual soul who knows that they are an eternal divine being? We have no enemies. And so, Martin, we develop PhDs in creating enemies of all kinds of people. Like, I know me and you laugh. Like, I went up some, but you were a diligent volunteer up in Monroe Prison. And I can remember one specific woman, we won't name her, who, played out some silly stuff, right? But she became, like public enemy number one. And with all this energy was projected onto her, right? And it served ultimately as a distraction from the potential of the work that could happen up there. And so I know I'll just speak for, I shared an example for you that I was connected to, but just speaking for me, I wasn't able to do my work if I did not create enemies and did not seek to demonize other people. And what's fascinating about that is all the things that I would demonize other people for. And this is not just, folks that are on the other side of the political fence. It was more often than not people that, essentially wanted the same world that I wanted. The truth is that if any of them turned a microscope to my life, they would have a lot to demonize me for. So what I've come to really know, Martin, is the energy I was projecting onto the world, to those people, was really a reflection of how I felt about myself. And it would not be until I had a different sense of myself, the sense that I have today, and the sense that I'm continuing to grow in, that I was able to step back from the desire or the need to create enemies and understanding I have no enemies. No one is my enemy. Everything works in my favor. But that required some spiritual maturity and spiritual commitment and a lot of painful bumps along the way to get to this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I definitely agree. I always needed an enemy. I think one of the ways I framed it to you not too long ago is like, I always had to have an antagonist in my story, right? There always had to be an antagonist. And that drove me.
Yeah.
drove me. And that's what I believed, anti-racist organizing was. I believed that it was always having that antagonist, always having that enemy. And, my whole purpose in life was to correct them,
Right.
to, to show them the way, the right way, the true path to liberation. And, the thing is I think functioning that way, unfortunately, the antagonists weren't always quote unquote on the other side. But a lot of times the antagonists started to be on the same side as us, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm feeling is like when we talk about the power of forgiveness, you know, I know that if I had recently I was thinking about like all the meetings that I used to sit through, right? Like
Hmm.
all those meetings, just meeting after meeting after meeting. And I was just, I was sitting here thinking, what would happen if I had, raised my hand at the meeting and said, what does it look like for us to have forgiveness in our heart when we talk to that person that's, running that government agency, or when we talk to that person that we feel like is creating a policy or upholding a policy that is inherently racist.
Hmm.
I think let's pause our conversation on strategy to overthrow that person or to undermine that person. And let's instead talk about what is a process of forgiveness looks like. Now, you know what would have happened to me in that room, right?
Right. Right.
I would have been thrown out. Physically or spiritually or emotionally, I would have been ejected from that room, right? So how does that fit in? How does forgiveness fit in to a movement, a social justice movement?
Well, Martin, I've done um, some work in a very conservative area of the country, the past couple of
Mhm.
years. And I've worked with police officers, firefighters. Most of them probably would consider themselves to be Republican, probably voted for Donald Trump, or consumers of Fox News. I mean, that, Breitbart, that's their worldview, right? But, the
Right.
thing that I've experienced working with them when I allowed myself to come in and understand. So for years, we talked about the power of socialization. And we would talk
Right.
about it abstractly, but we never really applied it. And the truth is, Martin, if you or me were socialized in the way these people were socialized and conditioned, we would be showing up exactly how they're showing up. That's how powerful
100%.
socialization is, right? And if
100%.
we
100%.
and if we truly understand the power of socialization, then we have to be able to apply some grace to the folks that we're engaging with, that we can sit in righteous judgment of and deem awful and all that kind of stuff. Because we could be showing up just like them. And the truth is we're showing up in our own ways, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And so the first step for me, Martin, in applying the power of forgiveness in the context in which we're talking about is that I have to show up with love and that grace and understanding, right? That I could be walking the world just like them. And the truth is, in my own way, I've walked my own path. But if you're blind to looking at yourself and if you're full on ego mode, then you're going to be in a place of wanting to make other people wrong and make yourself right. You want to be a place of constant criticism, which starts to amount to performative expression at maybe at its highest level. And you start to perpetuate the same ego-based energy that created this world that we're against. So you used a story of sitting in meetings. I think about a meeting you and I sat in with a person that is someone that we both really, really love. And he had a high level city position. And we participated in a dehumanizing, abusive attack on him.
Right.
And it might not have been us doing it, but we co-signed on it before, during, and after the meeting and never spoke up. Now, this was someone we loved, right? But the truth
Right.
is, all of us who were in that room attacking him had a variation of the same dynamics going on in our lives. And so that cycle of that type of stuff is what we perpetuated for years and years and years, to the point where we look at, the city where we did a lot of our work in Seattle. We thought we were so righteous, Martin, but things have gotten quantifiably worse in Seattle. People of color can't even live in this city anymore, can't afford to
Right.
live in this city anymore. And so that energy, just even on a practical level, continuing with that energy keeps the paradigm in place that you say you want. So you have to apply forgiveness with honesty. What am I really doing? How am I
Hmm.
really showing up? Right. And going back and I don't know how people are hearing this, but this is so true to me. If I'm treating that person in that room that way, or this judge or this politician in those ways, I'm fundamentally treating myself in that way. And that doesn't mean that we co-sign on things that we fundamentally disagree with. But the question is, how are we to be moved ourselves? And what moves me? Does it move you, Martin, if I call you up, Martin, you ain't shit, you ain't never going to be shit? I mean, is that going to move you to want to do something different? Or is that going to make you want to dig in your heels? And what I've seen that do is just keep the ego madness, the loop of ego madness just going, spinning, that wheel just spinning as fast as it can spin.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. And I also know that that's the foundation, I think, of what we call social justice movements. It's the foundation of what we call anti-racist movements, is perpetuating that cycle. And I think if you go back to the last episode, that we just recorded, I think, part one of this, of the power of forgiveness, I think what we talked a lot about is both you and I had to really put a lot of energy into cycle breaking in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And we were continuing cycles that were created outside of us as small children. Those cycles continued into our adulthood. Even though we were no longer those children, we were no longer going through the same things unless we were creating them, right? We were now the ones that were creating them.
Right.
And so, a huge part for us has been, in our growth and our evolution, has been breaking cycles. So what I see, and I know you see this, and Madi and Bonnie and all the people that have been with us for a long time, doing this work, that what we see is that we're now stuck in a non-evolutionary, non-forward moving cycle of anger, abuse, really looking for, like, I feel like we're always looking for the way that we are collectively mistreated. And I also feel like we talked earlier about being stuck in guilt and shame. That's what I feel when I'm in the presence of like anti-racist white folks these days, is I feel a lot of stuckness in guilt and shame. And I don't see us collectively breaking these cycles. And, so I feel like, can we apply the breaking of cycles that we have used in a recovery model in our own lives to the social justice movement?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a good question, Martin. And my short answer is yes. And my long answer would be, Mahdi will often talk about universal law says what you see is what you get. And so if you have hurt and pain and all the stuff you just laid out, Martin, in your subconscious programming, in your groundwater, then that's all you're going to see. Right. And if that's all you see, that's all you begin to respond to. And again, you just keep having that same dance going on and on. And if you think about this, Martin, and I think you probably would agree, in very much including ourselves, I don't know anyone that I've ever met who's come into the social justice movement who didn't come in carrying a knapsack of hurt and pain, unresolved, unhealed hurt and pain. And the structure of the movement is so external focused, which is ego focused, right? Having an outside in perspective of yourself. We're looking at everything externally. But the truth is, if we don't begin to heal and organize ourselves, we don't have any model for how to do that in the world. If you can't heal and organize and create justice within your relationship with yourself, within your own life, within your family, then you do not have a model nor a right to try to do that external, because that is, again, an ego-based approach. And so those of us come in hurt. I know I did. I know you did. And upon my reflection, everyone that I engaged with came in with a lot of hurt, and I'm not saying that hurt wasn't justified. I mean, they experienced events in their life that were hurtful. But as adults, we have a responsibility for transmuting that hurt to something that can create something new. And so we have used, we talk about manipulation. We have manipulated the movement for our own purposes in this futile attempt at trauma mastery. And, trauma mastery is this notion that you're going to recreate root traumas that you experienced as a child, hoping to make it different this time, but it never becomes different. It's a futile attempt. And we end up just fighting. And That fighting energy is actually making that which we say conscious with our conscious mind that we're against, we're making that stronger. And until we practice breaking the cycle within ourselves, we're never going to be able to break the cycle collectively. And so this work has to be done from an inside out perspective. And when we start to address and heal and correct that which is going on within ourselves, then we're going to be in a position to not fight anymore, Martin, but to create the world that we want to see.
And what I hear you saying, is that the first piece is stopping fighting with ourselves. And,
Yeah,
yeah, because most of us we're in massive conflicts with ourselves, right?
yeah,
And that's the key. The key to not being an external conflict and the key to everything really is to get on our own side, to stop fighting ourselves.
that's right. That's right. That's right. And you just said something golden, Martin. The key is to not just getting on our own side, but being
Right,
100% on our own side at all times. And if you
right,
think about that, Martin, if you think about that, I know when I first heard it, I'm like, whoa, that's impossible. But you think about it, it's insane not to be 100% on your own side, especially when you're asking other people in the world to be 100% on your own side. Because what we're asking institutions, the criminal justice system, healthcare system, education system, is to treat us 100, but we're not treating ourselves 100.
that's
And we
right.
have a bunch of people in the education system, criminal justice system, healthcare system, on and on it goes, who aren't treating themselves 100. So how can we ever have that expectation? So start with self. Start with self. How about we practice being 100% on our own side in our thoughts, our actions, those thoughts we have when we're laying on the couch by ourselves at 10 at night. How are we talking to ourselves? Where are we putting our energy, right? How about we start to apply that? And I promise all of our listeners, because I've experienced this for myself, things start to change. And then that opens up the possibility of allowing us to be happy. Because, Martin, one of the beautiful byproducts of forgiveness and the power of forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, is it opens up the door to be happy. And the truth is, none of us incarnated here to be miserable, to be in conflict, right? That's just because we've been socialized in this ego-based third density that we're in, right? But we have an opportunity to
Right.
be happy and to feel love and to express love and to express the fullness and the power of who we are as infinite beings.
So being loving is the only way to break these cycles, and being loving with ourselves, being loving with human beings that we understand are also infinite souls going through a life experience just like we are. And I
Right,
think that's where the forgiveness plays in, right? Like, I think when I think about some of the most horrific things that have happened, and I could see people listening to this and be like, I can't ever forgive, white people for doing this, or men for doing this, or I can never forgive because there's some of the most horrific things that we could ever imagine, right? And and it's still happening. It's still happening all over this world. That people are doing horrific things. I think there's certainly stories like the Dalai Lama talks about, the power of forgiveness and forgiving his captors and he tells a story of a Vietnam veteran, forgiving his jailers, his captors, POW from Vietnam, and he sees somebody that he was that was in the same situation as him, and he says, "Have you forgiven them?" And the guy says, "No," and then he says to him, "Well, then you're still there. You're
right.
still
That's
you're
right.
still you're still captured."
That's right.
And so there's certainly those ideas, right? But what I'm thinking about right now is that, forgiveness is for us. And I think we miss that. Like forgiveness, and you also don't have to forget, and you can still acknowledge the generational impact. We're not saying forgive individuals because they need to be forgiven, but what we're saying is that forgiveness in any way that makes sense to you is actually going to be for you, and it's going to free up energy for you, and it's personal energy that can lead to personal growth, but it's also collective energy that can lead to what we say we want in terms of societal changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, as you say that, Martin, it just takes me back to the first episode that we recorded around the power of forgiveness, that forgiveness is a choice.
Mhm.
And it is not forgiving the horrible action that was committed,
Right,
but it's
right,
forgiving the person for being unconscious when they committed those actions. So, I think about you being Jewish, Martin. I think about the Holocaust, and I went to Warsaw, Poland, and I got to go to the Museum of the Ghetto Uprising, and I saw a lot of the awful stuff that the Germans did to Jewish people. Now,
Yeah.
most of those Germans weren't born mass murderers and killers. They were conditioned and socialized into that. They became unconscious and began to act from an unconscious place. And so it's not forgiving the actions and the pain, but it's forgiving the person for the unconsciousness, knowing that I could have been raised as that German soldier, and I could have been conditioned and socialized in such a way to carry out that same stuff. Because,
Right.
we like to think that no, no, no. But if you're
No.
conditioned and socialized, just like the things that we might not be doing those specific things, but each of us listening on this call, there are things that people could sit in righteous judgment about you because you were unconscious. And so we tend to approach this stuff just from our conscious mind. And, Martin, as we talk about, our conscious mind processes 40 bits of information per second, but our unconscious, subconscious mind processes 40 million bits of
Mm.
information per second. So there's so much power. There's so much happening around us and messages that we're getting that we don't even see, that lock us into doing things that go against our higher nature, our higher self. And all of us have done something to be judged for. All of us. And so
Mm.
some things are more extreme, but even some things are more extreme for sure. But we have got to learn to forgive the unconsciousness in others so we can begin to forgive ourselves and be forgiven ourselves. Because if not, we're just going to stay stuck in this, we keep talking about this loop we're in. And some of us have to have the courage. It's a choice. You can surely not forgive yourself. You can do whatever you want to do. But we are contending that some of us have to have the courage to break this cycle so we can usher in a new world that's appropriate and reflective for our children and our grandchildren. I'm about to be a grandfather. I do not want my child coming into a world that is so cold and in such opposition to each other. I want my child to be able
Right.
to fully express their loving nature and to have love reflected back to them. And I'm going to do my part for that.
Mm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. I think those are powerful words, and I think with that, we can bring this episode to a close. I do want to say that I'm really glad you used that example because, I've held on to that anger, and I have a family member right now who's not speaking to me. A
Mhm.
person who, in many ways, I was a father figure to, and the reason why they're not speaking to me and why they hold a lot of anger towards me is because I held on anger and I wasn't, in a place of forgiveness. And I said some negative things about German people and Polish people because of my experience. Now, that was because I was stuck in that old way of thinking and being. Like, I don't feel that way anymore. I traveled in, I said those things even, it was almost like an old program, like you said, because I traveled in Europe and I traveled in both Germany and Poland and had good experiences for the most part, right? I didn't have any negative experiences. I saw some of the same things you saw. I saw the Jewish cemetery in Poland. I saw they still have one of the walls from the ghetto, and I saw Auschwitz or Auschwitz, and saw all kinds of stuff in Germany, and went to the former SS headquarters, and traveled with a young German person who I love and care about, did then and continue to now. But I still hung on to that old programming. And now I'm in a situation where that's coming back on me because now I want that person to forgive me for what I said, but I wasn't in a place of forgiveness when I said those things. And I think it's just like a small microcosm of what happens when we just stay in that loop of anger, that loop of hatred, and it doesn't serve us and doesn't serve us moving forward
No,
in
that,
our personal lives or in these movements to end oppression.
no, that's so right, Martin. And we keep up trying to apply the same ego-based energy that created this world to heal
Yeah,
this world. It's not going to happen that way. We have to create something new
yeah,
and start to evolve into who we fundamentally are, which are infinite soul beings of light that have no end and no beginning. And rooted in that is love and harmony with each other. We have to restore that. And, the universe is calling upon all of us, even though we're given free will and choice, the universe is calling upon all of us to step towards our highest selves.
that's right. And all we have to do is just answer and say, okay,
Yeah,
let's go. Let's do this. Let's try a different way, because the theme in all that we've talked about today is that the old way has not served us. The old loops have not served us. The old ways have not served us. And we're not getting what we say we want out of
that's
life,
right. That's
individually
right.
and collectively. So,
That's right.
man, I want to thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation. I'm glad we were able to do it. We had little technical difficulties, at the beginning, before we could actually record, but I'm glad we persevered. And it was awesome talking to you today, Dustin.
I feel the same way, man. I love you.
I love you too. And we want you all to know out there that we love you, all of our listeners, wherever you are on this journey, whatever your feelings are about forgiveness, whatever you're holding on to or getting ready to let go of. We love you dearly. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. We ask that you go to soulfocusgroup.com, see everything that we're doing. Make sure you're signed up, on our website for our podcast. We're going to have some podcasts for people, that aren't going to be just publicly released anymore. We want you to be able to hear those. Still check us out on YouTube and all the podcasting platforms as well. We'll continue to release new material on all the platforms. So just please come on this journey with us. And we ask that everybody stay safe, stay well, and most importantly, stay soul focused.
Peace.